At 35, James Reed had it all: a thriving business in Seattle, a luxurious home, and a reputation as a philanthropist. But one day, while rescuing a sick boy, he accidentally learns that his wife Alison has been cheating on him for years, and his company is under attack from a competitor's machinations. Can he protect those he loves and restore justice without losing himself? James Reed had it all, or so it seemed. At 35, he was the proud owner of Reed Construction, a thriving firm in Seattle that had earned him a reputation as one of the city's most reliable businessmen. His modern office overlooked the Puget Sound, its sleek glass walls reflecting the grayish-blue water below. Framed awards and certificates lined the walls, each one a testament to his success. Projects completed on time, buildings that transformed the skyline, and a handful of charity initiatives that had won him the admiration of the community. To the outside world, James was a man who had cracked the code to the American dream: hard work, sharp instincts, and a heart big enough to give back. Every morning, he'd sit at his polished mahogany desk, sipping black coffee from a simple white mug, a ritual that grounded him amid the chaos of running a multi-million-dollar company. His days were a blur of meetings, blueprints, and phone calls, but he thrived on it. The buzz of his phone, the clatter of keyboards from his staff, the hum of the city beyond the windows. It was the soundtrack of a life he'd built from scratch. People in Seattle knew his name. If Reed's on the job, it's done right, they'd say, and James wore that trust like a badge of honor. But beneath the polished exterior, cracks were forming. His marriage to Alison, a sharp-witted PR manager with a penchant for designer heels and calculated charm, had grown cold. They'd been together for 7 years, married for 5, and what once felt like a partnership had morphed into a silent battlefield. Alison cared about appearances. Her Instagram was a curated gallery of their perfect life, filled with photos of their sleek waterfront home, her latest Chanel bag, and James in tailored suits. But at home, she was distant, her words clipped and her demands endless. "We need a new car, James," she'd say, scrolling through her phone without looking up. "The neighbor's got a Tesla. We can't look cheap." He'd nod, too tired to argue, but the emptiness gnawed at him. That morning, as rain streaked the office windows, James flipped on the TV while sorting through contracts. A local news segment caught his eye, a story about an 8-year-old boy named Tom, pale and fragile, lying in a hospital bed at Seattle Children's. The anchor's voice was somber. "Tom needs a rare surgery to survive, but his single mother can't afford the $200,000 price tag. Without help, time's running out." The camera panned to the boy's small hand clutching a worn teddy bear, his eyes wide with a quiet fear that hit James like a punch to the gut. He didn't know Tom or his family, but something about the kid, the helplessness, the innocence, stirred him. He picked up his phone, dialed his assistant, and said, "Get me the hospital's billing department. I'm covering the surgery. All of it." Within hours, the payment was wired, and the news spread like wildfire. "Local CEO saves child's life," the headlines blared. Reporters called, colleagues texted congratulations, and James brushed it off with a shrug. "It's just money," he told a friend over lunch. "What's the point of having it if you can't help someone?" But the truth was, it felt good, better than closing a deal or signing a contract. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of purpose beyond the grind. Later that day, he decided to visit the hospital. He wasn't sure why. Maybe to see Tom, maybe to shake the mother's hand. But he drove across town, the rain tapping against his windshield like a restless drumbeat. Seattle Children's was a maze of white walls and antiseptic smells, but the staff buzzed with a quiet energy. At the reception desk, a nurse smiled when he introduced himself. "You're Mr. Reed? The boy's in room 312. His mom's with him now. She's been crying all day, happy tears, thanks to you." James took the elevator up, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum as he walked down the hall. Room 312 was quiet, the door slightly ajar. He knocked softly and stepped inside. Tom lay in the bed, hooked up to monitors, his small chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Beside him sat a woman, her back to the door, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, and James froze. Her face, those sharp cheekbones, the faint freckles across her nose, was like a ghost from his past. "Sarah?" he whispered, his voice catching. She stood, startled, her hazel eyes widening. James? What are you doing here? Her voice was soft but shaky, as if she couldn't believe he was real. Sarah, the girl he loved fiercely in college, the one he lost when her wealthy parents decided he wasn't good enough. 15 years had passed, but the recognition was instant, electric. She looked older, worn by life, but it was her, the girl who'd once dreamed with him under the stars, who'd promised they'd build a future together until her family tore them apart. I saw Tom on the news, James said, forcing his voice to steady. I paid for his surgery. I didn't know it was you. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling up. You did that? For us. She glanced at Tom, then back at James, her expression a mix of gratitude and something deeper, pain, maybe, or regret. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. They stood there, the beeping of the monitors filling the silence, 1,000 unspoken words hanging between them. James wanted to ask where she'd been, what had happened after she vanished from his life, but he held back. How's he doing? He asked instead, nodding toward Tom. Sarah wiped her eyes. Better, now that the surgery's scheduled. But it's been hell. His dad left when he got sick. It's just me and him. Before James could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Alison. Where are you? We need to talk. Now. He sighed, pocketing the device. I should go, he said reluctantly. But I'll check in tomorrow, okay? Sarah nodded, her gaze lingering on him. James? I never thought I'd see you again. He managed a small smile. Me neither. Driving home, his mind raced. Sarah, back in his life after all these years. Tom, a kid he didn't know but already cared about. And Alison, waiting with whatever new complaint she'd cooked up. When he walked into their pristine living room, she was perched on the couch, arms crossed, her blonde hair pulled tight in a bun. You gave away $200,000, she snapped, skipping the pleasantries. To some random kid? Are you insane? It wasn't random, James said, loosening his tie. He was dying. I had the money. End of story. Alison stood, her heels clicking against the hardwood. No, James, it's not. That's our money, our future. You didn't even ask me. Her voice rose, sharp and accusing. What's next? You gonna sell the house to save every sob story on TV? He met her glare, exhaustion settling into his bones. It's my company, Alison. My call. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. You're hiding something. I can tell. Who's this kid's mother? Some old flame you're running back to. James stiffened, caught off guard. You're being ridiculous, he said, but her words stung because they brushed too close to the truth. Alison smirked, turning away. Keep your secrets, James. But don't expect me to sit here and watch you throw everything away. She stormed upstairs, leaving him alone in the dim light. He sank onto the couch, staring at the rain-streaked windows. Sarah's face flashed in his mind, then Tom's frail form, then Alison's cold fury. Something was shifting, something big, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. But one thing was clear. His perfect facade was starting to crumble, and there was no going back. James Reed couldn't shake the image of Sarah's face as he drove through the rain-soaked streets of Seattle the next morning. The hospital visit had rattled him, not just because of Tom's fragile condition, but because seeing her again had ripped open a wound he'd spent 15 years trying to heal. Sarah had been his everything back in college, a bright-eyed dreamer with a laugh that could light up the darkest days. They'd met at a campus coffee shop, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared hopes of a life bigger than their small hometowns. He'd been a scrappy kid from a working-class family, determined to make something of himself. She'd been the daughter of a wealthy real estate mogul, sheltered but restless. Against all odds, they'd fallen hard until her parents stepped in. He could still hear her father's voice from that final confrontation. You're a distraction, James. She deserves better than some broke kid with big talk. Sarah had fought them at first, but the pressure wore her down. One day, she stopped answering his calls, and a week later, he heard she'd transferred to a school on the East Coast. No goodbye. No explanation, just silence. James had vowed then to prove them wrong, to build a life so successful they'd choke on their disdain. And he had. But seeing Sarah now, older, worn, but still her, made him wonder what he'd truly won. At the office, he tried to focus on a stack of blueprints, but his mind kept drifting. The buzz of his phone broke the spell, a text from Sarah. Tom's awake. Asking about the nice man who helped him. Can you come by? James hesitated, glancing at the clock. He had a meeting with a client in an hour, but the pull was too strong. Tell them I'll be late, he called to his assistant, grabbing his coat. Alison's accusations from last night echoed in his head. Some old flame you're running back to? but he pushed them aside. This wasn't about rekindling anything. It was about Tom, about doing something right. The hospital was quieter today, the rain replaced by a pale gray sky. When James stepped into room 312, Tom was sitting up, a faint smile breaking through his pallor. "You're back," the boy said, his voice weak but bright. Sarah stood beside him, her tired eyes softening. "He wouldn't stop talking about you," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. James crouched by the bed. "How you holding up, champ?" Tom clutched his teddy bear. "Better. They said I get the surgery soon, 'cause of you." James grinned. "Good. You'll be running around in no time." Sarah watched them, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she stepped into the hall, motioning for James to follow. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low. He braced himself. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, avoiding his gaze. "I didn't want to drag you into this. After I left, things fell apart. My parents pushed me into a marriage I didn't want. It lasted 3 years, long enough for Tom to be born. His father bailed when the medical bills started piling up. I've been alone since." Her words hit James like a slow burn. He'd imagined her living some charmed life, not this. "Why didn't you reach out?" he asked, softer than he meant to. She shook her head. "You were gone, James. I heard you'd made it big. I didn't want to be the ghost showing up to ruin it." He wanted to argue, to say he'd have helped her anyway, but the weight of her story stopped him. "You're not ruining anything," he said finally. "I'm here now. For Tom." She nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "Thank you." "Really?" Their eyes locked for a moment, and James felt that old spark, dangerous, familiar, but he buried it. Too much had changed. Back home that evening, the air was thick with tension. Alison was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a precision that felt more like a threat than dinner prep. "Late again," she said without looking up. "Hospital business?" James set his keys on the counter, bracing for the storm. "Yeah, checking on the kid." She slammed the knife down, turning to face him. "The kid? Right. And who's the mother? James? Don't lie to me. I saw how you looked when you came back last night. Guilty as hell." He clenched his jaw. "Her name's Sarah. We knew each other in college. That's it." Alison's laugh was sharp, cutting. "College sweetheart, huh? How convenient. You're throwing away our money on her brat, and I'm supposed to just smile?" "It's not like that," he snapped, his patience fraying. "She's alone, Alison. Tom's sick. I'm not going to let him die because you're paranoid." She stepped closer, her eyes cold. "Paranoid? You're the one sneaking around." "What's next?" Moving her into our guest room. The accusation stung, and James fought the urge to fire back. "You're twisting this into something it's not. I'm done talking." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "I'm not the fool here, James. Keep playing hero. See where it gets you." The next few days were a blur of work and hospital visits. Tom's surgery was scheduled for Friday, and James found himself drawn to the boy's quiet resilience. He'd bring comic books or tell stories about construction sites, anything to make Tom smile. Sarah was always there, grateful but guarded, and James respected the distance. But Alison's mood darkened. She'd stopped yelling, replaced her barbs with icy silence, and started disappearing for hours without explanation. James barely noticed at first, too caught up in Tom's progress, until one night he came home to an empty house and a note on the counter, "Meeting a client. Don't wait up." Suspicion crept in. Alison wasn't the type to work late. She thrived on control, not overtime. He called a friend, a PI named Mike who owed him a favor. "Just tell her for a day," James said, hating how it sounded. "I need to know what's going on." Mike called back 2 days later, his tone grim. "She's been meeting Henry Lawson. You know him, runs Lawson Development. Your biggest competitor. They're cozy, James. Real cozy." The name hit like a brick. Lawson had been gunning for Reed Construction for years, undercutting bids and spreading rumors. "How cozy?" James asked, his voice tight. Mike hesitated. "Dinner, drinks, a late-night drive to his place. And she had a folder with your company logo on it. Looked like documents." James hung up, his pulse pounding. Betrayal wasn't new. He'd felt it when Sarah vanished, when deals fell through. But this was different. Alison wasn't just cheating. She was conspiring. He dug through his desk, finding a contract Lawson had tried to poach last month. The numbers didn't add up then, and now he wondered if Alison had fed him inside info. The pieces clicked. Her anger over Tom's surgery wasn't about money. It was about losing leverage. He confronted her that night. She walked in at midnight, lipstick smudged, and froze when she saw him waiting. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice steady but hard. Out, she said, tossing her purse aside. Don't start. He held up the folder he'd found in her car, a parking stub from Lawson's building. Try again. Her face paled, then hardened. You're spying on me now? That's rich, coming from Mr. Charity. James stood, towering over her. You're screwing Lawson and selling me out. Don't deny it. For a moment, she looked cornered, then smirked. You're so busy saving the world, James. Someone had to look out for me. The admission cut deeper than he'd expected. Get out, he said, pointing to the door. We're done. She laughed, grabbing her bag. You'll regret this. Lawson's got plans for you. The door slammed, and silence swallowed the room. James sank into a chair, staring at the life he thought he knew. Sarah, Tom, Alison, Lawson, everything was colliding, and he was caught in the wreckage. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going down without a fight. The rain returned to Seattle the morning after Alison's departure, a relentless drizzle that mirrored the storm brewing inside James Reed. He stood at his office window, staring at the blurred cityscape, the weight of her betrayal sinking deeper with every passing minute. Her words, Lawson's got plans for you, rang in his ears like a taunt. Henry Lawson wasn't just a rival. He was a predator, a man who'd built his empire by stepping on necks and greasing palms. If Alison was feeding him intel, James's company, his life's work, was in more danger than he'd realized. But he wasn't the type to crumble. He clawed his way up from nothing once. He could do it again. His first call was to Mike, the PI. Dig deeper, James said, his voice clipped. I need proof, emails, photos, anything tying her to Lawson. And check my contracts from the last 6 months. Something's off. Mike didn't flinch. On it. Lawson's slippery, but he's not invisible. James hung up and turned to his laptop, pulling up files Alison had access to. She'd been his PR manager, privy to bids, client lists, even financial projections. If she'd handed Lawson a playbook, he'd know exactly where to hit. The hospital pulled him away from his spiraling thoughts. Sarah had texted, Tom's surgery is tomorrow. He's nervous. Could use a friendly face. James didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat and drove across town, the familiar route now a lifeline amid the chaos. When he arrived, Tom was propped up in bed, fiddling with a toy truck James had brought last week. Hey, champ, James said, forcing a smile. Tom looked up, his eyes wide. They're gonna fix me tomorrow. You think it'll hurt? James sat beside him, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. The doctors here are the best. You'll be fine, I promise. And I'll be here when you wake up. Sarah lingered by the door, watching them. She looked exhausted, her face etched with worry, but there was gratitude in her gaze. You didn't have to keep coming, she said as they stepped into the hall. You've already done so much. James shrugged. He's a good kid. And you? He paused, searching for words. You don't deserve to go through this alone. She nodded, biting her lip. Then, hesitantly, she spoke. There's something I need to tell you. About why I've been so jumpy. He braced himself, sensing the shift. Go on. Sarah glanced around, lowering her voice. A man came to see me last week. Said his name was Lawson. He knew you paid for Tom's surgery. Told me to convince you to stop throwing money at lost causes, his words. Said if I didn't, he'd make sure Tom never got better. James's stomach twisted. He threatened you? Sarah nodded, her hands trembling. He didn't say how, just that he had ways. I didn't know what to do, I was terrified. But I couldn't tell you. You'd already given us so much. Rage flared in James's chest, hot and sharp. Lawson wasn't just after his business. He was targeting Sarah, Tom, anyone James cared about. Why didn't you call me? He asked, softer now. She looked away. I didn't want to drag you deeper into my mess. You've got your own life. He stepped closer, his voice firm. You're not a mess, Sarah. And neither is Tom. I'll handle Lawson. He's not touching you or him. Her eyes met his, a flicker of hope breaking through the fear. Be careful, James. He's ruthless. Back at the office, Mike's call came faster than expected. Jackpot, the PI said, his tone grimly triumphant. Caught Alison and Lawson on camera last night. Dinner at some swanky spot downtown. She handed him a USB drive. Couldn't see what's on it, but I'd bet my license it's your data. And those contracts you mentioned? I cross-checked with a guy I know in the industry. Lawson's been underbidding you on every major project, using numbers only an insider would have. James gripped the phone tighter. Proof. Mike chuckled. Got a photo of the handoff and a recording of Lawson bragging to a buddy about taking Reed down. Sending it now. The evidence hit James's inbox like a bomb. Grainy shots of Alison slipping Lawson the drive, an audio clip of Lawson's smug voice. Reed's bleeding cash on that kid. By the time I'm done, he'll be begging me for scraps. James clenched his fists, the betrayal now a jagged-edged reality. Alison hadn't just cheated. She'd sold him out to a man who'd stooped to threatening a sick child. And Sarah's confession tied it all together. Lawson was playing dirty on every front. He called his lawyer, Claire Henshaw, a no-nonsense woman who'd handled his contracts for years. I need you to build a case, he told her, forwarding Mike's files. Lawson's got my data, and he's blackmailing someone I'm helping. I want him buried, legally. Claire didn't blink. If this holds up, we've got fraud, extortion, maybe corporate espionage. I'll need a day to draft it. Sit tight. James hung up, his mind racing. Lawson thought he could break him, but James wasn't the naive kid from 15 years ago. He'd fight, smart, clean, and relentless. That night, Tom's condition took a turn. Sarah called, her voice shaking. He's running a fever. They're rushing the surgery to tonight. James sped to the hospital, finding Sarah in the waiting room, her face buried in her hands. They said it's now or never, she whispered. He sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. He's tough. He'll pull through. She leaned into him, trembling. I can't lose him, James. He tightened his grip. You won't. I'm here. They sat in silence, the clock ticking agonizingly slow, as surgeons worked to save Tom's life. Hours later, a doctor emerged, mask dangling. He's stable. Surgery went well, but he's not out of the woods. Next few days are critical. Sarah sagged with relief, tears streaming. Thank you, she said, clutching James's hand. He nodded, a knot loosening in his chest. But the victory was bittersweet. Lawson's shadow loomed larger than ever. The next morning, James was back at his desk when Claire called. Case is ready, she said. We've got enough to sue Lawson for damages and push for a criminal investigation. But there's more. Someone tipped off the press. Lawson's spinning a story, says you're the fraud, cooking your books to look generous. It's hitting the news now. James switched on the TV, and there it was, a headline screaming, Seattle CEO accused of financial misconduct. Lawson's face smirked from the screen, his voice smooth. James Reed's a con man hiding behind charity. I've got proof. Fury surged, but James kept it in check. Lawson wanted a war. He'd get one. File the suit, he told Claire. And call Mike. I need everything he's got on Lawson's dirty deals. If he's coming for me, I'm taking him down first. Hanging up, he stared at the TV, Lawson's smug grin fueling his resolve. Alison's betrayal had cracked his world open, and Lawson had poured gasoline on the fire. But James wasn't done, not by a long shot. He'd protect Sarah, save Tom, and bury Lawson, all without throwing a single punch. This was his fight now, and he'd win it the only way he knew how, by being better than the bastards who tried to break him. James Reed woke to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand, the gray Seattle dawn barely creeping through the blinds. He hadn't slept much. Tom's surgery, Alison's betrayal, and Lawson's smear campaign had kept his mind churning all night. The screen glowed with notifications, missed calls from Claire, texts from Mike, and a flood of news alerts. He swiped one open. Reed Construction faces fraud allegations as rival claims proof. Lawson's gambit was in full swing, and the vultures were circling. James rubbed his eyes, steeling himself. He wasn't about to let a snake like Lawson dismantle everything he'd built, not without a fight. Claire's voicemail was urgent, suits filed. Lawson's team scrambling, but the press is eating up his story. Call me. James dialed her back, pacing the empty living room where Alison's absence still lingered like a ghost. What's our move? He asked when she picked up. Claire's voice was steady, sharp. We've got a solid case. Extortion, data theft, defamation. Mike's evidence is gold. The USB handoff, Lawson's recorded boasts. I've sent it all to the police, too. They're opening an investigation. But you need to counter the narrative, now. Lawson's painting you as a crook. Go public. Tell your side. James nodded, though she couldn't see it. I'll call KOMO News. They've been fair before. He hung up and scrolled through his contacts, landing on a reporter he'd met at a charity gala, Lydia Chun. She answered on the second ring. James Reed? This about the Lawson mess. Her tone was curious, not hostile. Yeah, he said. I've got the truth, documents, recordings, the works. Can you get me on air today? Lydia didn't hesitate. 2 hours. Studio downtown. Bring everything. Before heading out, he stopped by the hospital. Tom was awake, groggy but stable, his small hand clutching the toy truck. Sarah sat beside him, her face softer than it had been in days. He's fighting, she said, managing a faint smile. James crouched by the bed. Told you he's tough, he said to Tom, who grinned weakly. Like you. James chuckled. Maybe. Rest up, champ. I've got some business to handle. Sarah followed him into the hall. I saw the news, she said, worry creasing her brow. Is it bad? He met her gaze. It's ugly, but I'm fixing it. Lawson won't touch you or Tom, I swear. Her hand brushed his arm, a fleeting touch. I believe you. The trust in her eyes fueled him more than coffee ever could. He left the hospital with a fire in his chest, driving straight to Como's studio. Lydia met him at the door, her notepad ready. No softballs, she warned. People want answers. James nodded. Good. I've got nothing to hide. The interview aired live at noon. Lydia sat across from him, the studio lights hot and unrelenting. Mr. Reed, she began. Henry Lawson claims you falsified your company's finances to fund personal projects, like the surgery for Tom Carter. What's your response? James leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. Lawson's lying. I paid for Tom's surgery with my own money because a kid's life matters more than a profit margin. He's mad because I won't play his game, stealing contracts, blackmailing people. I've got proof he's the fraud. Recordings of him bragging about ruining me, photos of him taking my data from my ex-wife, Alison. The police have it now. Let them decide who's clean. Lydia raised an eyebrow. Strong accusations. Why should the public trust you? James didn't flinch. Look at my record. Every project I've done. Every dollar I've given back. Then look at Lawson's, lawsuits, shady deals. I'm not perfect, but I don't hurt people to get ahead. The segment ended with Lydia promising updates as the story unfolded. By evening, social media was ablaze, hashtags like #StandWithReed trending alongside clips of his interview. The tide was shifting. Claire called as he left the studio. Police raided Lawson's office an hour ago, she said, a rare excitement in her tone. Found emails between him and Alison, plus doctored files on your company. He's in custody, fraud, and extortion charges. You're clear, James. The suit's still active, but this kills his credibility. Relief washed over him, tinged with grim satisfaction. And Alison? Claire paused. She's not charged yet. But she's radioactive. No one's touching her now. That night, Alison showed up at the house. James opened the door to find her standing in the rain, mascara streaking her face, a suitcase at her feet. I messed up, she said, her voice breaking. Lawson promised me a cut, money, a fresh start. I didn't think he'd go this far. Please, James, let me in. We can fix this. He stared at her, the woman he'd once loved, now a stranger undone by her own greed. You sold me out, he said, his tone flat. You handed him my life on a platter. We left. Her eyes flashed with desperation. You need me. Without me, you're just some bleeding heart with no one to keep you grounded. James stepped back, hand on the door. I've got people who matter now. Go beg Lawson, he's the one you chose. He shut the door, her pleas fading into the rain. The divorce papers were already with Claire. He'd sign them tomorrow. Freedom felt raw, but right. At the hospital the next day, Tom was sitting up, color returning to his cheeks. Sarah beamed as James walked in. He's eating, she said, nodding at a half-finished Jell-O cup. First time in weeks. James grinned, ruffling Tom's hair. Knew you'd bounce back. They sat together, the tension of the past days melting into quiet relief. The news about Lawson, it's everywhere, Sarah said. You stopped him. James shrugged. Had to. He came after you too. That's where I draw the line. Their friendship had deepened, forged in shared battles, but James kept his heart in check. Sarah was a lifeline, not a lover. Her strength and Tom's spirit were enough. Still, as they talked, a shadow crossed her face. He's not done, is he? She asked. Men like that don't just quit. James's jaw tightened. He's in jail, Sarah. But if he tries anything, I'll be ready. That afternoon, Mike called with a bombshell. Lawson's got a lawyer pulling strings, high-priced shark. He's out on bail already. Word is, he's furious he went public. Watch your back. James thanked him, hanging up as a chill settled in. He'd expected Lawson to slink away, not regroup. Driving home, he spotted a black SUV trailing him for 3 blocks before it peeled off. Coincidence? Maybe. but his gut said otherwise. Later, Lawson himself confronted him outside the office. The man stepped from a sleek Mercedes, raincoat dripping, his face a mask of barely contained rage. "You think you've won?" he snarled, voice low. "I've got more moves, Reed. You'll wish you'd stayed quiet." James stood his ground, unflinching. "You're done, Lawson. The police, the courts, they've got you. Keep pushing, and you'll bury yourself deeper." Lawson smirked, stepping closer. "We'll see who's buried. Enjoy your little victory while it lasts." He drove off, leaving James in the drizzle, adrenaline pumping. Lawson was cornered, lashing out like a wounded animal, but James wasn't scared, he was resolute. He'd exposed the truth, protected Sarah and Tom, and turned the public in his favor. The law was on his side now, and he'd use it to finish this. Back inside, he called Claire. "Lawson's out on bail. Threaten me. Can we push harder?" Her response was immediate. "Oh, we will." He just dug his own grave. James hung up, staring out at the city. The fight wasn't over, but he'd drawn first blood. Lawson could scheme all he wanted. James had the upper hand, and he'd play it smart, legal, and relentless. For Tom, for Sarah, for the life he'd earned, he'd see this through to the end. The Seattle skyline glittered through the drizzle as James Reed stood on the rooftop of his office building, the cool air sharp against his skin. It had been a week since Lawson's threats, a week of holding his breath, waiting for the next blow. But the tide had turned faster and harder than he'd dared hope. The police investigation, fueled by Mike's evidence and Claire's legal hammer, had unraveled Lawson's empire like a house of cards. Fraudulent contracts, hidden offshore accounts, even a blackmail scheme targeting other competitors, Lawson's sin spilled out in a flood of headlines. James watched it unfold from the sidelines, his own name cleared, his company safe. Victory was close, but he wouldn't exhale until it was final. Claire called that morning, her voice brimming with rare glee. "It's over, James." Lawson's bail hearing went south. Judge saw the new evidence and locked him up pending trial. No fancy lawyer can save him now. Fraud, extortion, conspiracy, he's facing decades. "And your defamation suit?" "We're countersuing for damages." He's toast. James leaned against the rooftop railing, a slow grin spreading. "What about Alison?" Claire's tone cooled. "She's dodging charges, barely. Testified against Lawson to save her skin, but her career's dead. No one's hiring a turncoat. You're free of her." Relief hit like a wave, tempered by the sting of what she'd done. Alison's betrayal had carved a hollow space in him, but it was filling now with purpose, not pain. He'd signed the divorce papers yesterday, the ink a quiet farewell to a life that no longer fit. Downstairs, his team buzzed with renewed energy. Clients were calling back, contracts rolling in. Reed Construction wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. But James's mind wasn't on profit margins. It was on Tom, Sarah, and the future he hadn't expected to find. He drove to the hospital that afternoon, a lightness in his chest. Tom was out of intensive care, moved to a regular room where sunlight streamed through the window. The boy sat cross-legged on the bed, a comic book open in his lap, his cheeks pink with life. Sarah stood nearby, packing a small bag. Tom was being discharged tomorrow. "Hey, champ," James said, stepping in. Tom's face lit up. "James, look, I'm better." He held up the comic, a superhero soaring across the page. "Doc says I can go home soon." James ruffled his hair. "Told you you'd kick this thing." Sarah turned, her hazel eyes warm. "They say he's in the clear. Full recovery. Thanks to you." James shook his head. "Thanks to him. Kid's a fighter, like his mom." She smiled, a real one that reached her eyes, and for a moment, the years between them melted away. But it wasn't romance pulling them together. It was something deeper, a bond forged in shared battles and quiet trust. "What about Lawson?" she asked, lowering her voice. James grinned. "Jail. Done. He's not hurting anyone anymore." Relief washed over her, and she hugged him, brief, fierce. "You're a good man, James." They spent the hour talking about Tom's love for trucks, Sarah's plans to find a new job, the little house she'd rented across town. James offered to help them settle in, and she accepted, no hesitation. "You've done enough," she said, "but I won't say no to a friend." Friend. The word fit, solid and true. He'd loved her once, fiercely, but time had reshaped that into something else. Respect, loyalty, a promise to be there. Tom needed a mentor, not a father, and Sarah needed support, not a savior. James could give them that. Lawson's final reckoning came 2 days later. James sat in the courtroom, Claire at his side, as the judge read the charges. Lawson stood in a rumpled suit, his smirk gone, eyes hollow. The evidence was a tidal wave, Mike's recordings, Alison's testimony, emails proving he'd orchestrated the smear campaign and blackmailed Sarah. The gavel fell, guilty on all counts. 25 years, no parole. Lawson glared at James as he was led away, a silent vow of vengeance. But it was empty, his empire was ash, his threats caged. Outside, reporters swarmed, but James waved them off. Justice did its job, was all he said. Alison tried one last play that night. She showed up at his house, soaked from the rain, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, James. I was stupid. Lawson used me. I've got nothing left. Please, just talk to me." He looked at her, the woman who'd traded their life for a lie, and felt only pity. "You made your choice," he said, calm but final. "Live with it." She lingered, then turned away, disappearing into the dark. He shut the door, the past locked out for good. The next morning, he helped Sarah and Tom move. The house was small but bright, with a yard where Tom could play once he regained his strength. James carried boxes, hung curtains, and laughed as Tom directed from the porch. Sarah made coffee, and they sat on the steps, watching Tom test a toy car on the grass. "This feels like a fresh start," she said, sipping from a chipped mug. James nodded. "For all of us." He'd found something here, not love, not redemption, but a family he hadn't planned on. It was enough. Back at the office, he announced a new venture, the Tom Carter Fund, a nonprofit to help kids with medical bills their families couldn't shoulder. The first donation was his, $1 million, seed money to keep it running. His staff cheered, and the press ate it up, but James didn't care about the spotlight. It was for Tom, for every kid like him, for the man James wanted to be. Reed Construction stabilized, its reputation not just restored but elevated. Clients praised his integrity, competitors steered clear. He'd won, legally, morally, completely. A month later, Lawson's appeal hit the news. James watched the broadcast from his office, the anchor's voice crisp. Henry Lawson's request for a new trial denied. Evidence deemed overwhelming. The camera cut to Lawson in cuffs, his face a mask of defeat. James switched it off, a quiet satisfaction settling in. No more shadows, no more threats. Lawson had swung and missed hard. That evening, he stood on his rooftop again, the city sprawling below. The air smelled of rain and possibility. Sarah texted a photo, Tom grinning in the yard, a superhero cape tied around his neck. "Thanks for everything," she wrote. James smiled, pocketing the phone. He thought of Alison's downfall, Lawson's cell, the life he'd reclaimed. Justice had prevailed, not with fists or revenge, but with truth and grit. He protected what mattered, built something lasting. Driving home, he passed the hospital, its lights a beacon in the dusk. Tom was safe, Sarah was strong, and James was free. He turned up the radio, a rock song filling the car, and let the road stretch ahead. The fight was over, the scars fading. Upstairs, his empty house waited, not lonely now, but open, ready for whatever came next. He'd found his footing, his purpose, and it felt like standing on solid ground after years of shifting sand. The future was his, not perfect, but real, and that was all he'd ever wanted. James Reed, a 35-year-old Seattle CEO, seems to have it all: success, wealth, and respect, until he saves a sick boy, Tom, and uncovers his wife Alison's betrayal with rival Henry Lawson. As Lawson smears James's name and threatens Tom's mother, Sarah, James's old flame, he fights back legally, exposing their fraud. With Tom safe and Lawson jailed, James finds peace, forging a new family with Sarah and Tom, free from his toxic past, proving justice prevails through grit and truth.